The Chicago Bears thought they were one step away from leaving Illinois for Indiana. The votes had been cast, the plans were moving forward, and the move seemed inevitable. Then Roger Goodell stepped in, and what the NFL commissioner decided could change everything. The Chicago Bears board of directors met and made it official. The team's board of directors voted to advance their stadium development project in Hammond, Indiana. Just like that, one of the most storied franchises in the history of professional football announced it was heading out of Illinois, into a state where Chicago famously is not located. Bears chairman George McCaskey put his name on the announcement and posted it publicly. The team declared, "We believe a world-class stadium project in Hammond will transform the region, connecting northwest Indiana to the south side of Chicago through the Loop and across neighborhoods." Roger Goodell had been watching this situation build for months. Back in April at the NFL annual owners meeting in Phoenix, Goodell stood at the podium and made his position crystal clear. They need to find a solution for a stadium. He called their approach responsible, but he had a direct message for Illinois state officials too. "It's really important that there come a resolution, and it's relatively soon. I've spoken to officials in Illinois. This is an important time to get this resolved sooner rather than later." That was the warning. Illinois didn't heed it. Then, just 2 weeks before the Bears voted to go to Indiana, Goodell was at it again, this time in Orlando. He said there was a specific update on the Bears with respect to the two sites they are evaluating, one in Illinois and one in Indiana. He talked to Governor Pritzker personally. "I've spoken to the governor recently. I think there's a focus on trying to get something done there." Then the Illinois legislature blew it, and the Bears went to Indiana. The state of Illinois will be without an NFL team for the first time in its history, and the finger-pointing started almost instantly. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson drew the most fire, many pointing out that he drove the Bears to Indiana by insisting it had to be Chicago or he wasn't supporting it. Indiana, on the other hand, had already done everything right. Governor Mike Braun didn't waste a second when the Bears announcement dropped. Braun celebrated the announcement on social media. Writing, "Hoosiers, help me welcome the Chicago Bears to our great state." Hammond Mayor Thomas McDermott Jr. was even more direct. "Illinois couldn't get their act together, and we did it over here in a bipartisan fashion in 3 months. And we got a great offer on the table, and I'm optimistic the Bears are going to take our offer." Bears president and CEO Kevin Warren echoed the urgency that Goodell had been broadcasting for months. "We don't have a set deadline, but I am confident that sometime this spring-summer, we'll know." That spring-summer deadline came. Illinois fumbled, and the Bears walked across the border. The Bears are leaving the city of Chicago, where they have played for more than a century. The only question now is whether they'll remain in Illinois or leave the only state they've ever called home. This is one of the original NFL franchises, a team with roots deeper than most American institutions. The Chicago Bears are an original NFL team, debuting as the Decatur Staleys in 1920 before moving to the Windy City. A century of ice-cold lakefront Sundays, leather helmets and monsters of the Midway, and the '85 Super Bowl defense. All of it happened in the state of Illinois. The Bears have been in Chicago since 1921, playing at Wrigley Field before moving to Soldier Field in 1971. Soldier Field became the house. It became a landmark, literally before the 2003 renovation stripped it of that status. The renovation work was supposed to cost $400 million, but the final bill totaled $609 million. Taxpayers still owe more than $600 million of that debt. So Illinois taxpayers are still paying off Soldier Field, and the Bears want to leave. That is the uncomfortable context sitting underneath every single negotiation that has happened over the last 5 years. It's the smallest NFL stadium, with a capacity of 61,500. For a franchise worth billions, playing in the third largest media market in America, that number is a business problem. Every game with an empty skybox suite is revenue that doesn't exist. The Bears looked at the math, and the math pointed toward a dome. The team's announcement caps a nearly 4-year odyssey that began in 2021, when the Bears announced they were considering purchasing the shuttered Arlington Park racetrack. That was the opening shot, the first public signal that the Bears were serious about getting out of Soldier Field. All of the proposals involved moving the Bears into a world-class stadium with a dome. The Bears have long been frustrated by the limits of Soldier Field, and first threatened to move to Arlington Heights in the 1970s. A furious former mayor, Richard J. Daley, dared the team to move and vowed to prevent them from using the name Chicago. That's how long this tension has existed. Decades of mayors, decades of promises, decades of the same fight. And now, finally, it looks like one of those threats is going to stick. Soldier Field has great tradition, Goodell acknowledged, but lacks advancements in technology that contribute to the overall fan experience. The stadium is old, the experience is behind, and the franchise and the league want something better. The Bears' move is another blow to Soldier Field, as its other big tenant, Major League Soccer's Chicago Fire, announced they were also leaving. The old concrete colonnades on the lakefront, the place that hosted the Bears for half a century, is now staring down a future as a concert venue. Plans are being pitched to turn the stadium into a year-round concert venue. This was never really about sentiment. It was always about money, leverage, and whether the people in power in Illinois were willing to move fast enough. The road to Hammond, Indiana, didn't go in a straight line. It zigged and zagged through half a decade of real estate deals, political theater, and last-minute pivots. It started when the Bears purchased land. The sale was finalized for $197.2 million, with plans to build a new $5 billion domed stadium on the land. The 326-acre site would be anchored by a new 60,000-seat stadium, with a surrounding mixed-use district that would include housing units, hotels, retail space, and office space. Then came the property tax fight. Demolition of the former Arlington Park began in May 2023. But after disagreement over the property tax assessment, the Bears began to explore alternative sites. The Bears needed to know with certainty what their annual property tax bill would look like before they could borrow the billions required to build. Property taxes have been the Bears' main concern, with estimates topping $100 million annually in Arlington Heights. $100 million a year in property taxes alone. That's the number that spooked the ownership group and pushed them to demand legislative protection before breaking ground. Over 40 years, that approaches $1.5 billion in nominal savings. Stymied in Springfield, the Bears publicly shifted their stadium focus several times. Among sites on the lakefront, in Arlington Heights, and the ambiguous field of suburban possibilities, there was the lakefront proposal, a gleaming dome on the museum campus that would have required nearly $2.4 billion in taxpayer money and triggered a legal war with parkland advocates that died fast. Then it was back to Arlington Heights. Then it was the lakefront again, then back to Arlington Heights. Warren, on separate occasions, declared both the lakefront and Arlington Heights as the only sites that made sense for the Bears. Then in December 2025, something shifted. The Bears' sole focus for a new stadium was no longer Arlington Heights and no longer Illinois. Bears president Kevin Warren sent a letter to fans saying the team would explore other locations, including Northwest Indiana. Warren's letter was damning in its directness. We listened to state leadership and relied on their direction and guidance, yet our efforts have been met with no legislative partnership. Translation: we did everything you asked, and you gave us nothing. The Illinois General Assembly's fall veto session had closed in October without even considering the mega development legislation the team sought. Not even after the Bears told lawmakers they'd commit to sending $25 million to Chicago to rebuild public parks and playing fields. The Bears were watching the calendar burn. Early on, Warren had set a series of deadlines to break ground, arguing every month without a shovel in the ground was costing the Bears millions of dollars. But his failure to deliver on the promise had cost the team hundreds of millions, due to escalating construction costs with no end in sight. Every month of delay is a month where construction inflation eats into the project's feasibility. That pressure doesn't show up in a press conference. It shows up in spreadsheets, and it was making Indiana look better by the week. While Illinois was tangled in its own politics, Indiana was running the most aggressive franchise courtship in recent NFL history. They weren't winging it. They had a plan. They moved fast, and they put real money on the table before the Bears even officially asked. The Indiana General Assembly passed a bill to create a commission with the intent of attracting one or more professional sports teams to Northwest Indiana, possibly the Chicago Bears. That was in 2025. A full year before the Bears voted to advance their plans there. Indiana wasn't waiting around for an invitation. They built the infrastructure before the guests showed up. Then in early 2026, they formalized everything. In late February, the state passed a bill that established the Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority, which provided the vehicle to finance a Bears stadium in Hammond. That stadium authority wasn't symbolic. It had real teeth. Hoosier lawmakers authorized a new stadium financing authority that would put $1 billion in taxpayer dollars into a stadium for the Bears, who would get to keep all revenue generated at the Dome backed by a collection of new taxes and tolls. Let that number breathe, $1 billion in public money. And on top of that, the deal in Indiana calls for more than $1 billion in public subsidies to build a publicly owned stadium. The Bears would keep all revenue generated by the building and have the option to buy it for $1 once bonds are paid off. $1. That's the buyout clause. After the bonds are retired, the Bears can purchase a publicly funded NFL stadium in one of the most lucrative sports markets in America for a single dollar. Indiana modeled its financing on the approach that built Lucas Oil Stadium for the Colts. It refined the playbook: long-term bonds, a cheap buyout, dedicated tax districts, a higher hotel tax in Lake County, and a 12% admissions tax on stadium tickets, with a professional sports development area capturing additional state and local taxes. These aren't taxes that crush residents overnight. They're incremental, spread across every burger order, every hotel room, every ticket stub, in a region that stands to explode economically if an NFL franchise lands there. Indiana understood the upside. Illinois kept debating whether to capture any of it. Indiana offered the Bears about $1 billion in tax revenue, which could go towards stadium district infrastructure, to try and convince the Bears to move to Hammond. And not just that, the state of Indiana, led by Governor Braun, aggressively pursued the Bears. The Indiana General Assembly passed Indiana Senate Bill 27 to create the Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority, which would issue bonds to help finance the stadium. The site being considered near Hammond is near Wolf Lake, the former Arlington International Racecourse they bought for more than $197 million, or an area near the Lost Marsh Golf Course in Hammond, which is built over an old industrial dump. Critics were quick to point that out, but Hammond's mayor had a response ready. Mayor McDermott said he expects to have an answer from the team within a month and rejects any claims that the proposed site poses environmental concerns. "I think that if there were environmental issues, the Bears would have known about that 6 months ago, and Hammond wouldn't even be considered right now," he said. The Bears themselves confirmed the same sentiment. In the team's announcement, they framed the Hammond move as a regional transformation. "We believe a world-class stadium project in Hammond will transform the region," the statement said. "It will bring Chicagoland together and deliver new opportunities to its residents and businesses." If the Bears accept Hammond, every NFL owner with a lease expiring in the next decade will waive this deal at their state legislature. The cross-border bidding war becomes the template. What Indiana did here wasn't just about one team. It was a statement to every city in America: if your local government won't move, we will. The night Illinois lost the Chicago Bears wasn't dramatic. There was no single villain speech, no dramatic floor vote where the bad guys won. That ended with the House adjourning before sunrise without ever calling a vote. Members of the Illinois House ran out the clock on their legislative session without passing a bill to entice the Bears to build a new dome in their home state. Rather than cross the border, denying the team the property tax certainty the McCaskies had insisted would decide the destination of their new dome. The Senate actually did something. The Senate voted to approve the amended measure 37-17 with bipartisan support around 3:30 a.m. Monday morning, after working through the night. 48 hours earlier, that would have seemed impossible, but the House, they just went home. That would have enticed the Bears to build their domed stadium in their home state. Sen. Bill Cunningham, the man who spent years trying to thread this needle in Springfield. His Senate came through. The House walked away. The blame spread immediately, and it spread widely. There was enough blame to go around to fill a season's worth of NFL playbooks. The list started with former Bears president Ted Phillips and continued with his successor Kevin Warren, going right down the line to the officials who couldn't or wouldn't get the ball over the legislative goal line. But two names kept coming up louder than the rest. Chicago Teachers Union President Stacey Davis Gates publicly slammed the mega projects bill as a killer for education funding. Already being shortchanged by Pritzker, she claimed. Her opposition put the nail in the coffin for progressives reluctant to help a pro-sports franchise. And Mayor Brandon Johnson wasn't far behind. Governor Pritzker took a jab at Johnson, effectively saying Chicago's top politician had made grand demands to keep the Bears in the Windy City, while doing little to nothing to actually make it happen. "I know that the mayor has no plan. He has come up with no plan at all about how the Bears would end up staying in the city of Chicago," Pritzker said. Johnson had his own version of events, but even his response after the Bears announced the Indiana vote was telling. In a post on social media the Wednesday before, Johnson had crowed that Chicago was back in the game for a publicly owned Bears stadium. Approximately 42 hours later, the Bears organization voted to focus its stadium efforts in Hammond. One Illinois lawmaker captured the absurdity of where things had landed. "It's a shame we are where we are, where we're discussing whether the Bears should build on the $200 million lot they own in Arlington Heights, or the former hazardous waste spot in Hammond, Indiana. But that's where we are." The Bears had tried everything to stay. They floated a lakefront dome. They bought land in Arlington Heights. They offered to send $25 million to the city for public parks. They waited through 3 mayors, 2 governors, and 5 years of broken deadlines. The Bears released a statement saying the team had exhausted every opportunity to have a stadium in Chicago. "The Chicago Bears have exhausted every opportunity to stay in Chicago, which was our initial goal. There is not a viable site in the city. As a result, the only sites under consideration are in Arlington Heights and Hammond." And now, the General Assembly's breathtaking decision to fumble the ball and adjourn without doing anything for the Bears left Hammond, Indiana in the driver's seat. The legislature essentially called the Bears bluff, daring them to make the jump across the border. On Friday, the team said it was preparing to do exactly that. Roger Goodell had warned them. Goodell said the Bears needed to gain clarity on which project to move forward with sooner rather than later. "They need to find a solution for a stadium," Goodell said, "and they have looked not only in Indiana, but Illinois and other sites." His verdict wasn't a shutdown of the Indiana move. It was something closer to a realist shrug. He called both sites viable. He called the team responsible. And when Illinois ran out of time, the commissioner moved on. The NFL believes the Bears will soon make a choice between a new indoor stadium in Illinois and a new indoor stadium in Indiana, and that either location can work. That's what Goodell said after team owners were updated on the Bears stadium situation at the league meeting. The Bears' current lease doesn't expire until 2033, so there's still time on the clock. There's still room for one final Illinois miracle, a special legislative session, a last-minute term sheet, a deal no one saw coming. The announcement came less than a week after a failed Hail Mary attempt from Illinois state legislators to pass a last-minute bill that would have incentivized the team to build a new stadium in Illinois. But many Illinois officials say there are still signs the team is interested in continuing discussions with their current home state. George McCaskey said in April that playing in Indiana was something Bears fans would get used to. Were that the path the team chose? He cited the New York Giants moving to New Jersey in 1976 and deciding to stay there when MetLife Stadium was built. "Somehow the Republic has survived," McCaskey said. "Whether Illinois finds a way to bring them back or the shovels go into the ground in Hammond, one thing is settled: the Bears are done waiting." And the NFL's commissioner made sure everyone knew the clock was always ticking.